Welcome to the Impact Room, brought to you by Douglas Jackson, who help you hire more impactful, diverse leaders who stay for longer and are more successful. The Impact Room is a business, CX, and leadership podcast where exceptional, diverse, and impactful leadership and wisdom is shared. We dive deep into pressing topics that impact your customer-led business, featuring interviews with CEOs, COOs, Chief Customer, Chief People Officers, directors, influential leaders, and subject matter experts who share their lived experiences, top tips, thoughts, advice, and industry trends to help elevate existing and future talent. So let's dive into our next episode, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, or share if you enjoy this content. Thank you. Okay, so hello, I'm Michelle Ansell, Managing Partner from Douglas Jackson, and today I'm excited to be joined by Sandra Thompson in the Impact Room. Sandra is an empathy and emotional intelligence expert and founder of EI Evolution. You might know her from her wonderful podcast featuring our four-legged friends, which I was lucky enough to recently feature on. Sandra is also a TEDx and keynote speaker, a lecturer, and author of the Shine Bright Emotional Intelligence Journal, which is a great idea, Sandra, and a customer and employee experience consultant and emotional intelligence coach. Sandra is a lifelong student of emotional intelligence and psychological safety. And as she puts it herself, we can achieve so much more when we know how our brains work. Sandra, hello again, and lovely to be with you here today. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. And thank you for having me here. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Thank you. Well, let's get into it then. So, as I've mentioned in your introduction, you were, I believe, the first Goleman Emotional Intelligence Coach in the UK.
Yeah.
So, for those of us who don't know what emotional intelligence is, what is it?
So it's a skill that anyone, anywhere, of any age can learn. And in fact, many of us already have the skill. It's whether we've got permission to use it or if we are practicing it enough to be able to apply it in a really great way. Now, what does all of that mean?
Yeah.
So emotional intelligence, as described by Goleman, who wrote the book about 27 years ago, which is a little bit feisty at the time, actually, Michelle, because it was saying, you know what, you don't have to be utterly, brilliant at your IQ. If you've got your EQ, your emotional intelligence, you can, in fact, be hugely successful, and you'll be really healthy and you'll be much happier. So fundamentally, it's about understanding your emotions, being able to manage your emotions, and then having a skill to understand what might be going on with other people through asking great questions, and ultimately having much better relationships. And if I put that into context, if we think for a minute just about a single type of thing that we all do, imagine feedback for a second. So you've got someone who doesn't have any emotional intelligence, potentially, and that person says, put something in your diary for Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock, catch up, or want to have a conversation with you. And of course, the receiver of that invitation is thinking, what is that about? No idea. Uncertainty, what we call the chimp. So the oldest part of our brain goes to berserk, thinking things. What could it be? Blah, 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 blah. Then the meeting happens, and the person who set the meeting up is, well, I need you to do this. I need you to do that. I'm going to give you this feedback. All right. And then the person's receiving the feedback is like, what has just happened? They have paid no attention to the fact that I felt unsafe. I felt uncertain. They've blasted stuff at me. They've got their agenda going on, and then that's it. So that's an example of someone lacking emotional intelligence. On the flip side, here's someone with emotional intelligence. I'm putting something in your diary to have a conversation with you about what's been going. It's all good stuff. I've got a couple of pointers. I'm going to put something in the diary for Friday because that's when I'm free, and I can see you've got a gap too. Nothing to worry about. It's all good. Have a think about these types of things. Have the meeting happens. Hi, how are you? Response, I'm noticing that you're feeling a bit perhaps or tell me a little bit about what's going on here. And you're feeling calm, you're feeling heard. They play back what they think they've seen in you for verification. Then they give you this information. You say, how do you feel about that? Or how does that sit with you? What have you got for me? This person feels safe, they feel heard, they feel significant. They feel that the person has understood that they might be feeling a certain way before the meeting. And during the meeting, they hold the space. And it concludes with both parties liking one another professionally, feeling respect for one another. And there's a warmth and a generosity of spirit that comes from the kind of reciprocation of two humans understanding each other. We know that the first scenario happens. We have, maybe if we've been fortunate enough, we've experienced the second type of scenario. But I deal with companies where the first is very common. The second is possible, but not understood and not always thought to be relevant. Yet, what we also know is that people join organizations and they leave their managers. They leave cultures where they don't feel they've been recognized, heard, understood. There's no space for me. People aren't thoughtful, blah, blah, blah. And that's the beauty of what this skill is to know as any individual how you are and how you show up, and to be present and to inquire and to learn how others feel and to adapt your behavior accordingly. We can all do it, Michelle, and that's the beauty of this skill. But it does take a bit of time, because sometimes we've got to unlearn certain things, and then we've got to be more conscious on how we show up. And we've just got to keep practicing, because every day is different. We feel different. Our hormones are doing different things. We're having different scenarios. We're meeting different blah, blah, blah. So it's a beautiful thing. And I'm, as you've alluded to, I'm a massive fan and a student of it for quite some time.
Well, it's important stuff, isn't it? And can I dial you back to right at the start? Because you've talked about the practicing it, but you also said permission to use it. What do you mean when you say that?
Great question. So what I mean by that is there are people who have emotional intelligence, and sometimes those individuals are either managed by someone who quashes or perceives that that person is weak, when in actual fact they're being far more effective than anyone anywhere. That's one scenario. So whoever is leading you, and there's a weird thing going on sometimes, because they sometimes don't know how to handle people who are emotionally intelligent, because they think, well, I'm really direct and to the point and don't suffer any fools and all of that type of stuff and bish bash bosh. Why can't you be? Which again shows a lack of self-awareness and management of their skill. The second scenario is when you work in a culture that doesn't give people permission to display it. And what I mean by that is, and this is a bit of a hypothetical example. So say, for example, you are a head of a particular function, you work in customer experience, you're building empathy with your customer, but in fact you need to get off the call, or you need to get this thing over the line, or you need to just get it done quickly. You can't practice your skill effectively within the confines of the norms and behaviors of a particular organization. So that means that you either reduce the amount of empathy you display, or you become quite unhappy because you're not able to be who you want to be, and you want to be this authentic person. Or finally you leave because you just think to yourself, this isn't, I'm not allowed to do the work I know that I am good at and I enjoy and I get fulfillment from. So that's what I'm talking about when I say some people have it, but they don't have the permission to use it.
Thank you for going through that. And I'll tell you a little thing which will take me on to the next question, which I can't wait for you to answer, because I was at a conference on a panel a few weeks back, and I was meant to answer a question on something, and I'd prepared for that, of course. And then just before I went on, someone gave me a piece of paper and said, can you talk to how emotional intelligence impacts customer experience? And I looked at it and I thought, no. Where's Sandra? I need to speak to Sandra Thompson, and she's not in my diary for a few weeks. I don't have the answer to this. So I literally went to something that I'd heard on a podcast, a Stephen Bartlett podcast a couple of weeks before, and he said, or the one of the people that he was interviewing, and I can't remember who it was now.
Yeah.
And tell me if this is right or wrong, and then I'll go on to the next question. But they said the difference between the top 10% of leaders and the top 1%, the most successful leaders in the world, is that they have higher EQ than the others. Is that correct?
Correct. That's correct. And the other thing that is, well done you. Well done you for pulling that out of the bag. That's a bit cheeky, isn't it? Now that's a test of your own emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Did you manage the amygdala?
No, I was in a panic, sweaty palms, like heartbeat was going. I thought, I can't answer this question.
Oh, well, do you know, I'm always on speed dial. Whenever you get invited to come around, I'll pick up. I'm all good. The other thing that's an interesting stat is that, I'll see if I can get this right, something like 89% of our behavior, our how we show up, is indicative to how successful we are. Now, I know that's obvious, but if you think about that, that's not, and if you think about, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Well, who do you know? What kind of relationships do you have with them? What do they think of you? Do they trust you? Do they like you? Do they think you're a good egg? So if you strip everything back and you think about people work with people, people buy people, then that makes sense, right? So every day when you're showing up at work, if you are able to tune into this skill, you are honestly going to make your life so much easier. Honestly, because it comes down, doesn't it, to personal brand. You'll know far more about that than I do, but you know, if someone says, well, who is Michelle, I will be able to reel off a bunch of stuff, and I say, do you know what, she's a diamond, you're going to love her, she's like da, 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 da. You know where you are with her. Someone who is not able to manage their emotions or chooses not to manage their emotions, you might be saying, do you know what, bit of a loose cannon, if you get her on a good day, be careful though, because I've gone on the rough side of her. So, you know, it's all about how we make other people feel. And this whole thing about emotional contagion, all of us walking around are giving out energies and vibes. And some of us are oblivious to that. And some of us know. And I'm not saying fake it, but I am saying have the ability to say, do you know, I'm having a really tricky afternoon. I'm doing my best to show up. I just need to do such and such, and then I'll be back on it. All right. Great.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. And I get that so much. And you can see that even in my own team, you know, that confidence, because if you can have a good run or a bad run. And if you're having a bad run, you can see something goes from people, you know, and yet other people seem to do everything that's not in the playbook of what success is. And yet they're just successful, and you can't emanate it. So I absolutely get what it is that. And I always say it's this je ne sais quoi, this thing that we don't understand, but it just emanates off people that have obviously what you've just talked to then. So I mean that question then I alluded to earlier and we haven't got to yet. So I mean, when we talk about this and having an empathetic approach and sort of this emotional intelligence, like how then does it shape both our customer and employee experience, especially in sectors where perhaps empathy isn't traditionally prioritized? And how does it, I mean, I think we've already sort of touched on it, but how does it impact business outcomes, Sandra?
So that's a massive question. So I apologize. No, don't apologize. I'm just thinking these poor old listeners are like, yeah, he's going to be able to tell us everything right now. And I'm like, oh, sorry, folks, I can tell you a certain amount, but I can definitely let me give you a couple of examples. So first of all, in the customer experience space, let's look at the design of the experience for a minute. So if you have people designing an experience from the perspective that hasn't factored in the irrational, messy, ridiculous, beautiful, incredible brain that we all have, you're on a road to complaints and rumination, which is everyone asking why, and unfairness, not only from your customer, but also from your employee, who doesn't see the sense in some of the things the organization is doing for its satisfaction and not thinking about this messy, ridiculous, beautiful, sophisticated brain. And we see it all the time, don't we? So in a customer experience journey, you'll get the vibe of what a brand is all about by how it speaks to you, how it understands what the solution might be that you're looking for, the reason why you're there. The brand will talk to you in a way that connects with you because they know who you are and what you need. And that's kind of the online bit. When the human interacts with you, they get you, and they might simply just play back what you've said so that you feel significant. That's a really important word, Michelle, significance. Now, if everyone in customer experience thought about how can I make my customer feel significant, they will completely redesign the expectations they have of their frontline staff and give them far more flexibility and freedom to be in the moment. Because here's the thing, especially in customer experience, here we have a load of journeys, we have a whole load of people with good intention saying, I think that our persona Joseph will want to feel like this and he will feel like that when we do this thing. No, he's not, because if he's had a really bad day, or if he's dropped the kids off and actually that's been a bit of a disaster, or actually he's elated because he's just got a promotion away, he's going to be in a completely different place. So when the frontline member of staff asks Joseph a question and he responds in whatever way he does, that member of staff uses their emotional intelligence to adapt their response. I'm going to match you when you speak really quickly. I'm going to talk about the weather if that's what you want to do. I'm going to give you the inside leg measurement of a gnat because I know you want the detail, or I'm going to be talking about how brilliant this and that are, because they have listened to the tone, listened to the words, perhaps seen the facial expression and the body language, and they've read all of that because they're brilliant at emotional intelligence, and that person has all of their needs met because that frontline staff has had a brilliant measure of who Joseph is. And they're going to say, I bet you didn't really want that to happen, or I bet that wasn't what you were expecting. We're really sorry. Bit of vulnerability, bit of openness, bit of confidence. We're going to do this for you. I'm going to take ownership. I'm going to alleviate the fact that he thinks he's going to be stranded and bereft because this is the company, you've let me down. And you're going to handhold him to the next thing. I feel reassured, I feel valued, I feel cared for, but you're doing exactly the right thing for Joseph. You're not following the policy line which says, well, actually, Joseph, I'm terribly sorry, we can't do that because our book says blah, 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 blah. Against my paycheck, sorry. All of this stuff that goes on. This individual will feel like he is the only person that matters on the planet at that moment. And it happens, it does happen. That's the amazing thing, Michelle. I've seen this happen in a coffee shop in London, in a bar in Edinburgh, in a hotel in Paris. This does happen. But the person has got the EQ, and that's what makes the customer experience remarkable, because in any moment of time, a human is going to show up in a very, very different way. Are you ready for that? And do you have the skill to navigate that and respond in a way that is appropriate and relevant and significant? When it comes to staff, when it comes to employees, this is absolutely about knowing who they are. Now, this isn't, you are this age, you live here, you've got this many children, you've got that many dogs. It's not that. It's, you have these interests in these things, and your values are these things, and these things are important to you. I have had the blessing of being managed by people who have sought opportunities for me because they've said, there's this project going on, another part of the business, and I have a feeling you're going to love it. So I'm willing to give you half a day a week to go and do that thing. It's not in your objectives, but if you want to do it, they've got my back. They are interested in my progression. And when I say I need a day off because of X, Y, and Z, they say, you work so incredibly hard. Take that day. Don't even worry about taking it as leave. Come back when you're ready. Tomorrow, maybe next week, because I know you've got your stuff done. Imagine that. Imagine that. To be trusted, to not be treated like a child. This is transactional analysis, Michelle. This is the whole parent-child that often goes on in organizations. This is the, I will treat you like a child because you can't be trusted. I know I've employed you, but here are the rules. And if you're not at your desk at 9 o'clock, you must be mucking about. Or if you're working from home, I'm sure that you're going shopping and you're watching little puppy dogs on little videos, probably. No, I'm working very hard because we have an adult conversation, and it takes the manager and the leader to practice emotional intelligence, to feel comfortable and confident in themselves, to trust and nurture the relationship, not to minimize the risk. That was a long answer. Sorry, I got a bit carried away.
No, it was brilliant. And I mean, just to stick with it just a minute. So there's this comfortableness and confidence, because I can see exactly what you're talking about. And I'm putting the mirror on myself as well. And I can see my flaws, my own flaws and issues here, because, and certainly I think because we've changed so much in the workplace over the last few years, we've gone from more this very structure, command control, come in at 9, leave at 5, office 5 days a week. And we've obviously given people all that freedom. And now we can see it being clawed back in so many places, can't we? Because not everybody's obviously got high EQ, high emotional intelligence. But I think you've said it's so, let's say a leader or a business, do feel that way if someone's not at their desk at 9 or they can't have the day off. So you're saying really is about having the confidence to accept that they still feel that way. So it does create some anxiety, but not to allow it to bother them and sort of come down with the hammer and say, why weren't you at your desk at 9 o'clock? But you say, come on, just relax, leave it. We know they're a good egg, blah, blah, blah. I'm not sure if I phrased the question well now. I've talked too much.
No. You're absolutely spot on. But here's the thing. We went from an office environment with a few people working from home every so often through to obviously COVID, where that was it. What hasn't happened, and I'm still shocked by this, is that there hasn't been a renegotiation of what we'd call the psychological contract between everyone. So I remember years ago, I'm talking maybe 20 years ago, when I worked for the National Trust, I just worked at Air Miles and I'd come Avios, and I'd come back to the National Trust, and at Avios I could work from home. I was going through data sheets. I was sitting in my pajamas at 3 o'clock, for goodness sake, Michelle, because I was working so hard at home, and they'd let me do it because I'd actually smashed through everything. When I went to the National Trust the second time, I said, I'm working from home tomorrow. Everyone stopped and looked at me as if to say, what? You can't do that. You can't do that. What, you're working from home. You're going to get a delivery, aren't you? That's why you're working from home. And then in the afternoon, you're going for a coffee. No, you're going to see that I'm churning the work out. But the work I did then was, if anyone in my team wants to go and work from home, let's have a conversation about how that's going to work. Okay, so I know that you, Harriet, your energies are massively spiking at 7 o'clock in the morning. You're up at 5. I know what you're like. You're going to hammer it through until whatever time. You give me the outputs, do what you want. If you don't give me the outputs, I'm going to have a problem. So let's talk about how to get the very best out of you. Let's talk about which channels I should use to contact you. Because if my hair's on fire, I need to speak to you. I'm expecting you to pick up. What's the best thing for me to do about that? And again, these are adult to adult conversations, aren't they? So what hasn't happened is when we went into lockdown, I mean, you know, that was chaos in itself. But as we're kind of coming out of the like normalization of, are we working from home? Are we hybrid? Are we remote? What are we? Here is a dedicated conversation between me and my boss and my team to say, this is my psychological contract, which basically says, I'd like to work like this. I've got a bit of a team charter going on. This is when I can honestly do this type of work. I'm going to do this type of work this way. So my day is going to be a bit different to the 9 to 5, but you're going to get incredible outputs from me. We don't have those conversations. And that is, I think, the reason why people are still, leaders and managers are still a bit nervous, because they haven't set the boundaries and the expectations. And now for some people it's just a bit too late, because people who have the propensity to misbehave a bit or take the mick a bit are doing it. Lots and lots and lots. The majority of people work extremely hard, and in fact organizations get more time out of them than they would have done if they were in the office, because they feel an obligation, because they love the fact they've got flexibility and they're never going to jeopardize that. They want that to take away. But we haven't had those conversations. And when you've had those psychological contract conversations and you've got your team charter on how everyone's showing up, then the leader has additional confidence that they can use their emotional intelligence skill with to just calm down.
So these psychological conversations and contracts that you refer to, is this, when you talk about psychological safety, is that or is that something else?
Psychological safety is something different. So if you can imagine that, so let me just finish one bit and then I'll move on, if that's all right. So the psychological contract is just a fancy pants term for having your expectations on the table. That's all it is. But it is a different type of contracting to your terms and conditions and your job description. It's an understanding between us on the kind of behavior that drives me nuts, the kind of behavior that I love, how I'd like you to show up, how you should expect me to show up. That's that. Psychological safety is all about someone's ability to say something without the risk of humiliation, shaming, or any kind of recourse. So this is the work of a lady called Amy Edmondson. There's a book called The Fearless Organization. She is phenomenal. And her studies were in the medical profession, where she observed doctors and nurses not speaking up when they knew that something wasn't right, or they knew that a patient was at risk, because they had been reprimanded, shamed, humiliated, embarrassed so many times before. When they spoke up, they have chosen not to, because the emotion attached to shame and humiliation, they're the worst. You will never ever be able to completely eradicate the memories associated with those extreme emotions. And so therefore the pain of that we avoid. And so what happens here, and what this means, is leaders, peers, you know, people you work with, anyone around, if they've dressed you down, if they've humiliated or embarrassed you or shamed you, you're going to think twice about speaking up again in their presence, because I don't want to go there. So psychological safety is when someone consciously helps to create an environment where the other humans feel it's safe to speak up. Now, when leaders say to me, well, I've created a safe space and it's all really great, so everyone should feel like they'll feel safe, it'll be totally fine. And I'll say, hold on a minute, you can't tell them to feel safe. They're going to feel safe on their terms. So if you have consistent behavior that invites question, is okay with challenge, you keep your cool, you process what's being said, and you don't undermine them, cut them off, humiliate them, embarrass them, or any of that type of stuff, then you are creating the environment for them to feel safe. It's up to them whether they feel safe or not. All right?
Yeah.
And there's a really, really brilliant book, and I can't remember what it's called. It's about the safety model, and it's a lady called Leonie Hull, and I can't remember his surname now. So there's a bunch of questions that you can answer, and the top domain comes out from you taking this test, and it will tell you what is, I'm just thinking about how to phrase this. So it will tell you the thing that if someone does something in this space that's negative, you won't feel safe. Now I'm going to bring that to life a minute because I haven't explained that very well. So there are 6 different domains, and when I did the test, fairness came up as my top one. Right. So if a leader isn't fair, can't justify their reasons, does something that is wholly inappropriate, I'm going to be questioning them, or rather questioning their authority, and it's going to make me feel a little bit wobbly, because if they can do things that are not fair, what's next?
That is so interesting, and you know, we could talk on this for a long time. I can see so much in just what you've said already, and again, even just, you know, looking at myself first, there's so much I think I need to clean up myself, you know, just from that perspective. And I think so many of the leaders I talk to as well, they just haven't got this concept at all, as I'm sure you will know. So this is great. Thank you, Sandra.
Not at all, not at all. And I think there's just one little thing to add to that, Michelle. You know, years ago when I was employed, and the first time I was a leader, I think I was shocking, because I had these expectations. I was running at 1,000,000 miles an hour because I had a personal agenda. And I remember some people that I was leading saying, we can't keep up with you, and you've lost us. We're trailing behind, and we're worried that if we say that, you're going to just disregard us and work even harder and do it all yourself. So we're all work in progress.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about your journey a little, if we can, because you've got a background in marketing. You know, you've worked with many value-based and purpose-led organisations, and I think I'm interested. I mean, would you consider yourself an academic?
Do you know what? I'm an amateur academic. I love getting into the detail of the evidence and research in things. I think I might have gone red. So I've written 2 dissertations. The first one was rubbish. The second one was actually all right, because it was all about emotional intelligence and branding and about employees. And I did that later in life. I did that when I was 29. And the whole idea of having these academic theories and kind of evaluating them and critically evaluating them, and knowing that these were solid bits of work, I'm a bit of a geek. And so when I was invited to teach, when I was invited to lecture, oh my gosh, that was just like, because all of the other lecturers were proper academics. They were proper, you know, there were some that were professors and doctors and all sorts of stuff. And I would just be like a sponge to them, even into my 40s. I was just loving it. So I think the answer to your question is, I'm not a proper academic, but I do really think it's important, and I'm going to say something controversial, at a time when so many people have an opinion and so many people are influencing others. Even in this household, I will be challenging my partner's poor children. I say, where did that come from, that particular viewpoint? And have you read this? And do you know about this study? And they're like, we don't really care, because some influencers said it.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's important for us to have a grounding in things that are scientifically evidenced and robust. And I really hope that I continue to have that thirst for a little streak of academia, because people do, in the consultancy work that I do, I will always be recommending books and Harvard Business Review articles and journal articles, so that they can feel confident in the things that they're saying. Because
Yes.
I'm often challenged, like, why did you do that? Well, actually, and then they're like, okay, I really wish I hadn't asked. But so yeah, sorry, that was a long answer again. But I think I love people who want to learn.
And I think, academic or not, I think that, that work in progress that you talk to, that having that curious nature, and certainly, as you say, there's so much we're told, and there's so many sound bites now, isn't there? It's easy to latch onto something that it's true, and actually there's no foundation. It's extremely important, if we are repeating things, to basically authenticate it and know that it is actually factual, rather than just spreading things that perhaps aren't.
I'm all for creativity, no doubt about it. So be clear that this isn't me going, if you haven't got an academic, blah, 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 blah. But it's when we're talking about certain things that are fundamentally not proven, I get a little bit jittery about that, I think.
Yeah. And so, I mean, on your journey and this continuous improvement, I mean, even this year you've launched your Emotional Intelligence Pawdcast, which obviously we've talked about is for our relationship with four-legged friends. You've also now the author of your Emotional Intelligence Journal and book Shine Bright. Can you talk a little about these projects and experiences? And also, I think, you've shared through your posts about yourself coming out of your own comfort zone at times. How do you help yourself to tackle these new and sort of possible scary opportunities?
I was very fortunate in that when I was brought up, I was encouraged to do things that I'd never done before, even if it was as simple as eating stuff that I'd never eaten before, or going to the theatre, or going to the opera, or doing stuff. And, I'd do it a few times. If I didn't like it, I'd dump it. If I'd liked it, I'd move on to the next thing. I was very, very, very lucky in that. And I think that it feels like, for me anyway, that I've kind of got over the whole, if it's not perfect, I'm not doing it. So that's, I think, one thing is I really struggled with that early in my career. Is like, well, if I can't do it 100%, I'm not even going to bother. And I think that the whole kind of like scrappy bootleggy type thing, having a go, seeing where it goes, if it doesn't quite work out, it's okay to stop or change path completely. The thing with the book is that I've been meaning to write a book for years, and I suddenly, interestingly, as a consequence of not getting certain projects that I thought I was going to get, it's been a very interesting year as a consultant. I thought, well, there's going to be a reason why I'm not getting these things. So if I've got this space in time, I'm not going to sit watching my emails to see whether something comes back to me. I'm going to write a book. And so that's what happened. And because I'd been cogitating about it for so long, when I actually put pen to paper, it happened so fast, Michelle, honestly. Luckily, someone I knew someone who had a creative who wanted to do a bit of work in undergrad. So within 6 weeks, we pulled this baby off. Brilliant. And that was fantastic. And there's more to come. There's 7 more in that particular, so watch this space. Then the podcast was a funny thing in that I did some work for a significant animal charity. And I thought at that point, what I'm observing here, the dog and the human, and the fact that the dog teaches the human more about empathy, more about how to be a human than us humans teach each other. That's what I thought. And so in a typical kind of academic way, I'm like, right, bought all the books about all the vets, learned all about the dogs, learned all about the vets, learned a bit about behavioral stuff, not very much. I'm still on a journey on that. I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll write a book about dogs. This is before Shine Bright happened. So I wrote up a bit of a script for that, sent it over to a guy who I knew who was a publisher over in France. And he just came back and went, no, I don't understand this. What are you talking about? It was a nonsense. I thought, I know what I'm going to do. I'm not going to write the book then or that. I'm going to write a book about emotional intelligence. And then I will do a podcast, because then I can speak to people and see what their relationship is with their dogs, see what they say they learn about with their dogs. So we did 22 episodes this year.
Yeah,
And next year we're going to be doing it slightly differently. I'm going to talk to vets. I'm going to talk to charities that do stuff with dogs. So it's the next edition. But I started that going, well, I'm going to do this. And if no one listens, it doesn't matter. And if I have a great time, then, and the person on the other side has a great time, and I send them some treats to say thanks very much, that will be fine. And that's what happened. And I think that my friends were like, right, what are you doing now? But listen to this. What about, and they're like, yeah, I can come on. Yeah, you can come on. And you tell, and before I knew it, everyone was telling everyone else. And so what is the message in all of this? I think that I've been in this consultancy game for 14 years. I've gone down I've done some lecturing. I've gone down there now. I've written a book, and there's more to come. I've been a guest on podcasts, including yourself, which is fantastic. And I just thought, I'm going to turn it the other way around. I'm going to be the host, and I'm just going to see what happens with this. And I do think that there is a dog book still in me, Michelle, which will come out hopefully next year. I've just got to get my head down. And also there are 3 other things that have come out of other conversations that are going to happen next year, which again are going to be extraordinary, because I just think more people need to know about this skill of emotional intelligence. How can I do something different and engaging and informative and enjoyable so people can grab it? So even more to come.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think what I find, and like, you know, what runs through what you've said, I think if you do things that matter to you and that you're enthusiastic about and the reasons are right, it doesn't matter, does it? No. I think it's if you try and create something, like you say, perfect doesn't exist. If you try and create something that you think people want, that's when you end up in a tricky spot, don't you? But if it comes from within, if you've got a passion for it, that in itself becomes infectious, and you know that you find your tribe, don't you? I think.
I think you're right. I think that the other thing that I've done this year is I've reached out to people to say, I really think there's a synergy between what you do and what I do, and I like how you do what you do. Do you want to do something with me? And I hadn't done that before because I've been so busy with client work, I hadn't had the opportunity to properly sit back and observe. So I do think that this year, for me personally, has been quite transformative, and it has set me up for the years to come. And I guess, what does that mean? I think that if the people listening to this show consider reflection and taking a moment to pause just to work out whether there are other things that they could be doing that are really great for their soul. I mean, they could be doing stuff that's really great for their soul anyway. But what other things might you consider for an hour a week that really light you up? I feel very lucky in that respect, that I love what I do. I love what I learn, you know?
Yeah, brilliant. So, I mean, what tips would you give to others who might want to follow your path, or, you know, perhaps become emotionally intelligent themselves?
So as far as the path is concerned, I think that just keep going. And even if you might have the odd no, just keep asking, or take some of the really unsaid things that you intuitively and instinctively pick out, change your course a little bit and just keep asking. Don't make that the main thing. Make sure you're doing other stuff. Don't become obsessive to it, but keep curious and ask people questions, because honestly, I fundamentally believe that humans do help each other. And if they don't help you, they'll find someone else who can. So keep asking. That's one of the things I said to the 18 and 19-year-olds is, what's the worst that can happen? They'll say no. move to the next. So following the path, be open, try stuff that makes you feel a little bit, even on the brink of feeling a bit nervous or totally out of your comfort zone. If you visualize it being brilliant and it's only going to take you that long, it's going to be fine on the other side. Just do it, because you might just find there's something new. On the part of emotional intelligence, if you're able to write down stuff in a journal each week, if you can do it every day, which is, this is what I'm grateful for. This is my intention for the day. So this is how I intend to show up. And at the end of the day, just spend a couple of minutes reflecting what went well, what didn't go so well, what did I learn today? That is so incredibly transformative, because here's what it does. It gives you an opportunity to process what is going on, because we are on autopilot most of the time. Let's face it, I'm in that boat too. When we take a moment to be grateful, that top trumps all anxieties and worries, because gratitude can't sit with, I don't know the science on that, but the gratitude can't sit with anxiety. So you will feel in a better space. And even if you did that, you're going to be able to see patterns in what you notice. You're going to enrich what's called your emotional you're using emotional granularity, which means you're increasing the number of words you can use when someone asks you how you are. You can be more descriptive, which means you know yourself better. So my first tip is just to journal. Just do it once a week to start off with, a couple of minutes in the morning, a couple of minutes in the afternoon. If you can get it to every day, that's really good. But even just taking a moment, and you've got to write it. Don't be doing the whole typing on the computer or typing on your phone, because the process of writing, the actual pen to paper, does something else to the circuitry in your mind, in your head, that enables you also to process that emotion, and that's good for you.
Excellent. Well, what a note to leave on. And obviously all the links to your Shine Bright journal as well will be in this, as will ways people can contact you. So I really, really appreciate your time, Sandra. It's been a fantastic session and so much to go into. So anyone that's interested to contact you, obviously we'll share all of that, and I hope people do. So thank you again, Sandra.
Thank you so much. This time has flown and it's been such a rich conversation. Thank you, Michelle.
Good.